All right, so our next author is Daniel Hennelly. He's going to be discussing achieving your goal of becoming a published author. I'm going to unmute you now, Daniel. Go ahead and say hello.
Hello. Did everybody hear me?
I hear you.
Good.
I don't see you at the moment, however.
Uh-oh. Okay, can you see me now?
Yes, I can, very
Okay.
clearly. And you're hearing me, obviously, so I think it's
Yes.
good for you to go ahead and get started.
Okay. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dan Hennelly. I've lived in Norfolk pretty much most of my life. I've self-published 2 murder mysteries. The first one was Fatal Knowledge that I published in 2013. It's a collegiate murder mystery set at fictional Chesapeake Bay University. I've worked at ODU since 1984, and when somebody was kind of reading my book, they said, gee, that sounds very suspiciously like Old Dominion University. Well, possibly. And so one of the biggest questions I always get about the cover of my first book is, who's the blonde on the cover? I don't know. So I don't have any contact information for her. Then a few years later, I published my second collegiate murder mystery, Stairway to Death, also set at fictional Chesapeake Bay University. And then my final book that was published last year is Slave Against the Galaxy. It's a science fiction novel set several centuries in the future, and it deals with the theme of slavery in a futuristic society. So the purpose of my talk today is not to promote my books, although that would be helpful. My purpose today is to talk about self-publishing. Please note that my purpose is not to promote iUniverse Publishing, the publisher of my 3 novels, but to deal my experiences in self-publishing, the 2 murder mysteries and the 1 science fiction novel. You can go to iUniverse's website to review their publishing packages and the services provided. And they're not the only self-publisher out there. This is the one that I happen to choose. So how did I become a writer? In 1999, while sitting on a beach during our vacation at Chincoteague, I was reading a science fiction novel and thought I could write something more interesting and started my quest. To say I was ill-prepared was an understatement. I had taken exactly 9 hours of English courses during college. During my vacation, I outlined the plot and characters of the novel dealing with the theme of slavery in a future society. After many false starts and missteps, it took 6 years to finish the first draft of 151,000 words of Slave Against the Galaxy. And actually, at the time when I finished, I didn't have a title. I had several potential titles. And somebody asked, well, how many type pages is 151,000 words? Well, it's over 500 type, double space type pages. People kind of, want kind of more graphic. So in March of 2006, I started sending out query letters and sample chapters to literary agents and science fiction publishers, and quickly racked up over 50 rejection letters and emails. Most rejections were impersonal form letters. 2 publishers and 1 agent provided helpful criticism out of all those submissions. 1 small sci-fi publisher in 2007 liked my 3 sample chapters and asked me to send the whole manuscript, but ultimately rejected my novel. A Canadian science fiction publisher said he could not publish United States writers since he received a Canadian government subsidy. However, he liked my novel and the theme of slavery. As he pointed out, slaves are peripheral characters in many science fiction novels and movies, but are not the protagonists. He pointed out that my novel needed pruning. At that point, word count was over 140,000 words. A publisher would not take on a novel of that length from a previously unpublished author. An agent in 2011, after having my manuscript for over a year, sent me an email that my novel was the best one of the batch he had just rejected. I don't know whether that was kind of a backhanded comment or what. He recommended I write a new opening chapter that was more action-driven than rather a mere introduction to the characters. During the year he had my manuscript, I had come to the same conclusion, was actually working on a new opening chapter. In 2010, I was asked to serve on ODU's Dream Fund committee. An anonymous benefactor gave ODU money to establish a dream fund to enable non-faculty employees to pursue their dreams. Intrigued by the Dream Fund, I decided to pursue my own dream to become a published author the next year. I considered requesting funds to attend the Mystery Writers Conference in New England. Then I saw an advertisement in Writer's Digest for iUniverse Publishers, a print-on-demand publisher based in Bloomington, Indiana. iUniverse offered several different publishing packages with different options and levels of service. Since my wife and I were putting 3 sons through college, I had not considered using a print-on-demand publisher. Before selecting iUniverse, I did my homework. I went through their catalog and bought a Roman history novel they had just published. The workmanship of the book was the same as one that had been published by Random House. Later, I emailed the author and asked if he was happy with his publishing experience. In general, he was happy with the finished product and detailed the pitfalls he had encountered along the way. However, I would say that, in general, on a scale of 1 to 10, his novel's literary merit was probably about a 5. But it was interesting. He was a former soldier of the Iraq War and decided to translate his experiences in Iraq to serving in the Roman legions. However, some of the things I felt he did not do a lot of historical research and had a lot of historical anachronisms in the novel. In 2011, I submitted my request to the Dream Fund to publish my science fiction novel. My dream was not approved. Looking back, I realized that I was not ready to publish my novel. Even though I had finished writing it 5 years earlier and had been working on revisions, my novel was still not ready for prime time. Someone advised a young writer to write what you know. After working at ODU since 1984, I knew the world of higher education just as Miss Marple knew the little village of St. Mary Mead and embarked on writing a murder mystery, Fatal Knowledge, set at fictional Chesapeake Bay University. I finished writing my second novel in late 2011. In the winter of 2012, I submitted my request to the Dream Fund Committee again, this time to publish Fatal Knowledge, with the hope that a collegiate murder mystery might appeal more to the committee than a science fiction novel. I was genuinely surprised in early April to find out I had won an award of approximately $1,800 before taxes to cover the cost of purchasing the Premier Pro publishing package from iUniverse. This is the first word of caution. Be careful if your dreams come true. 8 months of hard work lay ahead. The first thing I had to do was combine 35 separate Word documents into a manuscript and format it according to the publisher's specifications. By mid-July, I had finished my revision and submitted the manuscript to iUniverse. Then I had to make decisions on the size of the book, color of the paper, prepare a 50-word author biography, back cover copy, front cover mock-up, and a marketing blurb. All this was a bit overwhelming for someone who had never published a book before. About 3 weeks after submission, I received a 50-page evaluation of my manuscript. The evaluator critiqued my manuscript, pointing out sections of the books that were good and sections that needed work. There were some vague observations without specific details, such as grammar and syntax needed work. Starting from the evaluation, I began revising my manuscript. In the final editing process that lasted almost 4 months, I trimmed the novel from 119,000 words, again about 460 double-spaced type pages, to about 116,000 words. The evaluation of my second murder mystery, Stairway to Death, was more detailed and much more helpful in the editing process. The evaluator gave suggestions on restructuring several chapters, as well as a target of cutting my 113,000 word manuscript to under 108,000 words. The evaluation of my third novel, Slave Against the Galaxy, was also very comprehensive. The evaluator recommended that I stop head shifting. My first 2 novels were written in first person. My science fiction novel was written in third person. Most scenes are told from the point of view of one character. However, there were several instances where 2 or 3 characters contributed their thoughts to a scene. Although several noted authors have used head shifting, the evaluator indicated that it was out of vogue and recommended I rewrite several chapters to make it less confusing for the reader. The manuscript evaluators utilized by iUniverse are freelance editors, and that is why the quality varied. The written evaluation was all I received. I was not given contact information for the evaluator. You're on your own. There is no option to have there is an option to have your book professionally edited, but the cost would be exorbitant. And again, you would have no contact information for the editor. Working with the graphic designer on the cover, iUniverse gave me access to an images database. Their contract was with Shutterstock for the first 2 books and Getty Images for my science fiction novel. Using my mocked-up cover, the graphic designer provided me with 3 possible covers as well as a back cover design for me to approve. And they were actually very helpful and listened to my suggestions. So then when I got to my science fiction novel, I was very fearful about what my cover would turn out to be, because science fiction novels have a very specific design to sell them. But having the access to Getty Images gave me several possible photos and artwork for the cover. In the interim, since my first two novels were published, our university shifted the graphic design process overseas. My first two books were done with US-based graphic designers, while my third book in 2019 was done by a graphic designer in the Philippines. Then, to give you some examples of the graphic design process, in my science fiction novel, the breaks within a chapter, there are little Saturn planets instead of the traditional 3 asterisks. A nice touch, in my opinion. The original design for Slave Against the Galaxy had crossed battle axes at the start of each chapter. I believe that would be more appropriate for a fantasy novel like Game of Thrones. Instead, I suggested crossed swords to replace the battle axes. The designer offered me several clip art crossed swords to choose from. Overall, I have no complaints about the graphic design process for my 3 novels. And on the second novel, they kind of, from the 2 science fiction novels, you can see that they tried to use the same colors and the same format in terms of the cover. So since I'm hoping to do perhaps another novel in this series. About 10 days after submitting a final manuscript to iUniverse, I received the proofs to review and make any corrections and changes necessary. The proofs are formatted exactly as the book will appear when printed. I printed out the final manuscript and started reviewing. iUniverse gives you a block proof form where you notate each correction by page, paragraph, and line. The author is responsible for copying and pasting the sections of the text that need correction, then provide the revised text next to it. The author is given 50 free corrections. If you need additional corrections, you must buy additional blocks of 50. Any corrections necessitated by an iUniverse error are not counted against the 50. This process is not designed to rewrite the novel. Your novel should be in its final form at that stage. On each of my novels, I had over the allotted 50 corrections. I thought I had thoroughly proofed my first novel before I submitted it, but had over 80 corrections. However, I learned from my mistakes in editing my first novel and cut down the number of corrections on my preceding novels, although both exceeded 60 corrections. Most of my corrections were actually wording revisions of a sentence or paragraph, not necessarily correcting a misspelled word or anything like that. Once the block proof form is submitted, the book moves to the production stage in about 10 days, and the book is available for purchase through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The formatting for an ebook takes about 2 or 3 weeks longer. When I went to publish my second mystery, I received a 10% discount as a returning author from iUniverse. In February of 2019, iUniverse sent out an email offering 40% off any publishing package. It was a flash sale, and the offer had to be responded to in a couple days. Combined with my 10% returning author discount, my science fiction novel was published at a 50% discount. That kind of wraps up the self-publishing process. Does anybody have any questions about how it goes or what to expect further?
Go ahead and type any questions in the chat box, folks.
Okay. Okay, T is asking, what is my marketing process? That's one of the areas where I feel I probably need assistance in. You don't get much marketing assistance from iUniverse. Yes, the books are published, can be purchased through Barnes & Noble and Amazon. But, if you want to get them promoted in a local bookstore, you have to go there yourself. So one of the things I've been very fortunate at is that working at ODU, the ODU bookstore arranged 3 book signings for my books. And I sold a number of copies. Each signing I thought was very successful. I sold anywhere from 25 to 30 copies of the books. But, for instance, in order to get the book at a place like Barnes & Noble or J.M. Prince Books in downtown Norfolk, J.M. Prince did carry a couple of my books, mostly as a favor to me because I know Sarah Pishko. But in terms of getting your books out there, you have to pretty much do all the marketing yourself.
social media is a good tool for these sort of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at getting your word out there. If you've got friends who are willing to spread the word for you, that's also helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do have a Facebook page, yes. Mm-hmm. What's next in my series? Well, I'm working on, at the moment, a murder mystery set in 1940 in Norfolk. It's going to not related to any of my other books. Norfolk in 1940 was experiencing an influx of population due to the expansion of the military in response to World War II, as well as the expansion of the two shipyards in the area. And so the population of Norfolk, practically doubled overnight. And Norfolk was actually very sleazy back in 1940. I mean, if you think we have problems today, go back to 1940, and you'll see that we've actually made a lot of progress. One of the things that has always rankled the old city leaders in Norfolk was the American Mercury magazine, and a very influential magazine in the 1930s and 40s, published an article, Norfolk, our worst war town. Not a bad place, or Norfolk, has problems. Norfolk, our worst war town. And it detailed all the problems that Norfolk had with prostitution, crime, overcrowding. And like, for instance, when you read about some of the things that were going on in Norfolk, like, for instance, the area, we currently, go out Little Creek Road to Tidewater Drive, and the area out there was known as the Badlands. Apparently, there were a number of roadhouses, trailer camp brothels, all of this going on outside the city limits of Norfolk. The city limits of Norfolk did not go that far. And so there were a lot of problems. So in my murder mystery, a professor at the Norfolk division of the College of William and Mary, which is now ODU, is going to be found murdered in an alley in downtown Norfolk. And then our intrepid detective has to find out, who murdered him. I'm also working on a sequel to my science fiction novel, Slave Against the Galaxy. I ended it not saying the end, but to be continued. And then I'm hoping to do a third story in my collegiate murder mystery series. I've done 2 chapters of that so far. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do with the 1940s murder mystery is illustrate it. One of the things with the iUniverse, you can have up to 20 illustrations in a book. Black and white illustrations, and I have a number of photos from the Slover Library's Sargent Memorial Room that I would hope to get permission to use in the book. I thought I saw another question pop up.
There was a comment. Norfolk states easy until 1965.
As a male writer, do I have strong female characters? Sometimes I feel the characters are strong. In my science fiction novel, you have a love story between Paul Faulkner, who's a young officer, who is having a romance with Artemis, who is another officer. And she's engaged to Lord Sebastian, who's the heir to the throne. And just as the two of them decide that they're going to, make their love public, Paul finds out that he was born a slave, and then is enslaved and suddenly loses everything, goes from the top of Spartan society as a officer to the bottom as a slave. So Artemis is a very strong character. She's a female officer. You have a female admiral in the book. You have several female officers in the first section of the book, where where it's set on a cruiser. And then when Paul's a slave, he becomes involved in the slaves resistance group, and many of the members of the resistance group are females. So, yes, I think I do have strong female characters. In my 2 murder mysteries, the professor who solves the mystery, his wife is kind of his Dr. Watson.
Great. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to leave with the audience before we moved on to the next and final author of the day?
But if anybody is interested in doing a self-publishing of their novel, I would advise them, as I said earlier, to do their homework. Check out the various publishers. I settled on iUniverse. There are several others out there. Another thing that's very interesting that you have to be aware of is that once your book is published, you're going to be besieged by phone calls and emails from people who want to publicize your book for $2,000. I got an email that, we'd like to, promote your book to agents and film companies in Hollywood. And, when I check out the address on Google Maps, it's a mailbox place like the UPS store. Yes, it's in Hollywood, but it's not like they actually have any sort of a presence. So you are going to be besieged. Like, for instance, yesterday, and it's amazing how they can find you because, iUniverse has my cell phone number, which, they don't, I asked them, they don't give that information out. But people must have programs because I've gotten calls from the same people in my office, my home, and even on my cell phone. I don't give my cell phone out that often. So, if you do publish a book, you're going to be besieged by people who want to sell you additional services.
That's a very good point there. Do your homework before making a major decision like that. Okay, thank you so much, Daniel.
Okay.